Hey, it's Paula Hines, Lonergan. Time's up for me to be silent. And if you've been keeping note of my videos of late, I've been addressing a lot about Whitney Houston. And the reason that I've been talking about her is because I watched her movie on a plane recently, and it just so impacted me, my thoughts, my feelings, and also provide a lot of insight into her as a person. Now, of course, it's a movie about Whitney. She wasn't there to speak for herself. However, the persons that, spoke, her family, friends, acquaintances there, seemed to bring up very valid points, which, like I said, provided a lot of insight into the decisions she made and her ultimate demise. In this video, I wanted to talk a little bit about the relationships that, Whitney had. One in connection to her marriage to her husband, Bobby, and her daughter, Bobby. Now, in the movie, you never know. It doesn't mention that, Whitney was abused as a child, but later in the beginning, but in the end, her brother says how he was abused by a cousin, and he said Whitney was also abused by this same cousin. And then there was a personal assistant who said that as an adult, Whitney, confided in this personal assistant that, yes, I was abused by this same cousin that her brother said he was abused by. So, that being the case, assuming that's true, there's valid reasonings on, like I said, why a person makes the decisions that they made because of the childhood experiences, particularly sexual abuse that they may have had growing up. Now, in the book The Courage to Heal by Ellen Bass and Laura Davis, it addresses in a subheading on page number 5 how sexual abuse affects self-esteem. Now, it says here, when children are abused, their boundaries, the right to say no, and their sense of control in the world are violated. They feel powerless. And sometimes, many times, most times, a person may carry these feelings into adulthood. So some survivors of childhood sexual abuse, it continues, feel like there's something wrong deep down inside. They feel that if people really knew them, they'd leave. And some survivors have experienced repeated victimization, rape, assault, battery as adults, meaning that a person that's been abused as a child may tolerate abuse as adults. And now in tabloid, in the tabloids and newspapers, you became very aware of the turmoil in Bobby and Whitney's marriage. But it's interesting because at some point in the movie, one of the family or friends in the movie said, they encouraged Whitney not to tolerate the abuse from Bobby Brown. However, it seemed like she just couldn't let it go. Now, we all go into marriage, desiring for it to work and feeling very positive about it. But now, whether a person stays in an abusive, situation, as Whitney did, may have a lot to do with how they feel about themselves. And how they feel about themselves may be related to their experiences in childhood, if they experience childhood sexual abuse. So we can see how choices of mates or partners, as well as what a person allows within a relationship, can be affected by past trauma. But, parenting is also affected, by a person, who has been, abused as a child. And in that same section, there's a section on page 9 in the Courage to Heal book that says how abuse affects parenting. It says, when children are abused by a family member, are not protected, are not offered support when it's disclosed, they miss out on healthy modeling. Now, healthy modeling is basically they do not learn how how to parent correctly, I guess, in other words. And so so basically it's saying as a result, sometimes they end up repeating the same damaging patterns they grew up with. They abuse or neglect their own children or fail to protect them from abuse. So now, it seems that Whitney, as she was growing up, that her mother, Sissy Houston, was involved in her career and pursuit of music. So her two brothers, Whitney's two brothers, acknowledged how, Whitney and her two brothers spent a lot of time with different family members because the parents just weren't around, or available. And that being the case, if as the movie says, the brother and also Whitney were abused by an older family member, there may have not been opportunity to disclose that. And if it was disclosed, it was not perhaps believed, and when Whitney had her own child, it seemed like she loved that child to death. However, her ability to parent may have been lacking slightly. Now, some of the things that it mentioned, Whitney, there was a family member who Whitney called when Bobby was a baby. And Whitney says, I need help with the baby. And this family member came over, and the family member says, and, Bobby, little Bobby, baby Bobby, slept with me for the next 8 years of her life. Now, that being, even if it wasn't every night, but that is indicative of if that is indicative of Whitney's parent, then, it seemed parenting, then it seemed like there might have been a little, something lacking as far as maybe what she was able to give to her child. And granted, the superstar she was probably busy touring and concerts, and but even some, the family members acknowledged that, when Whitney would take little Bobby on tour, with her, that it wasn't the right atmosphere for a child to be in, But then again, Whitney looked perfect. you know we only got glimpses of her various problems, drug use, or things like that, but for the most part, exteriorly life looked fine. But apparently, as far as her parenting, there might have been some things lacking because of the abuse she suffered as a child. In the Courage to Heal book, it continues. It says, sometimes survivors feel too damaged or busy coping with their own abuse to have children of their own. For women who wanted children, grieving this loss can be a painful part of the healing process. Now, this is something I can actually kind of relate to slightly. My choice in not having children was, the fact that I had this clear recognition that, children can't be protected, and I was afraid of not being able to protect a child, so I opted not to bring a child into this life. And then, granted, in recent years, I have been involved with my own healing. So it's like another, aspect of my choice not to have children. But, in having children, sometimes a person can be so overwhelmed in their own self, and exteriorly they can look just fine, but tears of a clown, like Smokey Robinson says, there can be great pain inside. And I just have this sense that Whitney's level of pain that she was carrying because of her childhood sexual abuse, affected the type of parent she was able to be. In the book, The Courage to Heal, on page number 10, it says that some survivors are uncomfortable with being affectionate with children. They have not adequately protected the children in their care. They find it hard to balance their children's needs with their own. So these are some of the effects of childhood sexual abuse on a parent. So sometimes that ability to protect the children in our care may not be there. And I just have this sense that the level of perhaps occupation in her career, combined with perhaps complications in her marriage, as well as the drug use, all may have contributed to Whitney not being as present as she perhaps could have been, or maybe even wanted to be, for her child Bobby. But a lot of times it's generational. Once again, Sissy Houston, it sounds like, was busy career-wise as she was raising her children, and Whitney proved to be the same, in raising her child. And like I said, Whitney cannot speak for herself, so it's only reliance on, you know, what friends and family say. But my main point in addressing, you know, all of this and connecting to Whitney Houston is, you know, I mean, the movie's already out, so that's, you know, the fact, you know, that what is brought out and what is said is not my thing. But, you know, but I mean, I just want to bring to attention the fact that, I mean, here we have this beautiful talent, you know, that, you know, died. And, you know, but at the core of, once again, her decisions, you know, and her life choices could have been the sexual abuse. And that being the case, she's not alone. It's not unusual. Unfortunately, it's typical for people that have experienced self-abuse to have certain issues, certain problems. But it all comes down to acknowledging and facing what was experienced, recognizing it wasn't your fault, and work on the healing. And I think Whitney never got there. And it's sad, you know. But I mean, these are just, you know, my thoughts in collaboration with the Courage to Heal book. I'm not the professional. I just know from my own experiences and the things that I've read and learned. And I just thought the movie Whitney Houston just provided a lot of insight, and, you know, can be very educational for all of us really who have suffered childhood sexual abuse, and recognizing the effects that it has had on people, it can have on us, and can have in the future on others, which if we recognize that, it can enable us to have needed compassion to help others, at least to understand others, and do our part individually. Anyways, time's up for me to be silent. What do you think about this? Did you see the video, Whitney? Were you surprised when they mentioned she had been sexually abused? You know, like I said, from the beginning, I just kind of had this sense. And when they confirmed it at the end, I'm like, I knew it. Anyways, let me know your thoughts on this. You know, have you noticed, you know, abuse affecting parenting or relationships or relationship choices? Maybe not in yourself, but in others. Anyways, feel free to email me, timesupforsilence@gmail.com. Or you can send me a note, you know, put my address here, or you can put a note in the notes section. Anyways, please like, share, and sign up to my YouTube channel. And if you know of anybody else that can benefit from this information, please send it along. Thanks.